Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pokemon Legends Arceus. We're going to be taking on our first real boss fight this time. Huzzah!
Oh right, I forgot about this little
Hello,
ship.
Cowboy in northern Japan. Yeah, this guy.
The Japanese cowboys. Gotta love them.
Well, you know, um, wait, in context, where did this guy get his cowboy hat?
Beats me.
I mean, you can buy like a fully functional three-piece suit at the store, so I assume there.
In this is a time travel story.
he ordered it from
I'm not even
ancient Unova.
I'm not.
I don't know.
No, I'm not even sure cowboys existed this early in history. I'm trying to work that out in my head. Like,
So cowboys,
that's-
in the way that we know them from pop culture, don't really exist.
well,
'Cause-
well, I mean, like, yeah, but also like the actual cowboys. I'm not sure they existed either.
So there were cowboys, and they're called that because they were ranch hands that like helped with the cows, cowboys.
Well, I'm talking more in the sense of, did they exist at this particular point in world history? I'm trying to work out if
Considering we're not that far back in time, like 100 and something years or so.
They were
so
like mostly a post Civil War kind of thing during like the whole like Manifest Destiny sort of thing. But it really was a very short amount of time, like between like 1830-ish to like 1880-ish.
oh yeah, way back when we
Yeah.
were expanding west.
Yeah, it's like, and like there were like shootouts and like ghost towns and all that stuff, but like being a cowboy wasn't about being like, this town ain't big enough here for the two of us.
So when this girl walked in, like the first thing I thought was, wait, how did you put in Fire Emblem Engage by mistake? Because
Nope.
this looks pretty silly.
Oh yeah, so I've heard Fire Emblem Engage has really good map design and gameplay mechanics, but I'm just the serviciness of the like characters, and I'm more talking about like the bringing back old characters element of it. Fire Emblem's always going to have fan service, as in cheesecake character designs. Like that's just never going away.
Well, I don't know. They did fine enough without much of it in Three Houses. It's like I can't really think of any cheesecake in that game.
It does help that most of the characters are like 15, so
Well, yeah.
Although that doesn't stop them from sexualizing the 15-year-olds in the really old Fire Emblem games, but that's a discussion for another day. Yeah, I don't know. So like I've heard that the gameplay in that is good, but I just have been kind of off Fire Emblem for a while, and I got the Advance Wars remake instead, which has been filling my strategy itch, and
The Advance Wars remake is so good.
it's really good. Yeah.
I will say, as someone who's played maybe about the first quarter of Engage, I didn't have time to like really stick with it. From what I played, Engage is absolutely fantastic as a gameplay experience. There are some things it dropped that Three Houses did mechanically that I would like to see come back, but on the whole, it is definitely a better Fire Emblem game than Three Houses was on pretty much every level.
I think I just got burned out on Fire Emblem when I played Fates. Because I played through all of Conquest, which is a mixed bag in terms of there's some really cool things, but it's just exhausting to play. I think I've mentioned this on a playthrough before, but um, when you play Fire Emblem and you've got like your actual playtime on the on your file select, and my playtime was something like 40 hours 30 minutes on there. But when you go to your 3DS log and see how long you played, like total, my playtime for Conquest was 80 hours. So I spent 40 hours on failed attempts because I had lost a mission. And it's like, that's exhausting. And then I played not Revelation, Birthright. I played Birthright I took a little bit of a break and then played Birthright, and Birthright is one of the most empty and boring games I've played in my life.
Yeah, the whole let's make an entire campaign for each difficulty mode was not their brightest idea.
Yeah, and I didn't. The story at that point was so dumb. I didn't even want to see how it ended. So I didn't play Revelation.
It's also really fucking weird that you're expected to play through the easy mode and the hard mode before the middle mode, but you know.
Actually, that is a Pokemon thing in Pokemon Black and White 2. In Black 2, you beat the game and then you unlock hard mode. Cool. You beat White 2, you unlock easy mode.
Easy mode. Yeah.
Excuse me?
What?
Sure,
What?
game. Yeah.
Thanks. Like the only other games I can think of that have easy mode as an unlockable are the ones like the original Devil May Cry that do it because they want to encourage you to try normal mode before shifting to easy.
Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? I shouldn't just shit on Fates because the game that I actually had to give up on Fire Emblem wasn't Fates. It was Echoes. Echoes, and I know that that's probably blasphemy just for some people because I know that people love that game, but I couldn't with it. Like, I felt like all of the extra stuff, like going through the towns and the dungeons, just felt like busy work that you weren't really doing anything.
It wasn't really designed for that kind of thing originally, was it? It was a remake of an older Fire
There were like
Emblem?
towns and dungeons, but like they're just empty and they don't add to much. And then when you actually get to the strategy portions of it, there's so many of the maps are just like your army is on one side and the opposing army is on the other side, and it's a flat featureless plain with like maybe some trees, and then you like push your armies into each other. And that just didn't. It took, I think, like 13 chapters before there was like a fight with like a broken down castle where you actually had to like maneuver your units and positioning mattered, which is the stuff that I enjoy about Fire. And that's part of why I've been enjoying Advanced Wars a lot more, because it's more the meat and potatoes kind of strategy stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I thought Echoes was boring as hell, and I couldn't finish it.
It was a remake of a really old Fire Emblem game, so
Yeah, and I know that they've had some problems with that, because I know the remake of Shadow Dragon is the remake. The remake of the first Fire Emblem game I know also had some issues, because it's like they're trying to modernize this old game but still keep like the elements of that old game mostly the same. So, it's kind of a hard balance to make. Although, if I remember correctly, the remake of the third game on DS was pretty good, but that's the one we didn't get in the West, so, sucks to be us. But yeah, I would really like a remake of the Game Boy Advance game, but, I don't think they'll do that.
I want a remake of the Teleus games, but they seem to pretend those don't exist except for when Ike needs to show up.
Listen, Ryan, I'm sure everybody has a spare $400 to buy non-boxed copies of Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn.
Just came back from TMG and seeing them for like $300 is like a...
Bro, it is depressing looking at retro game prices, especially when you that you missed out on certain things. Like, you remember, oh yeah, I saw that at GameStop for $20 one time, and I was like, yeah, I'll get it later. And then now it's a $200 game.
That was me in the original Shantae back at Toys R Us.
Yeah.
Because I saw that on the shelves, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. I wanted a Game Boy Advance game.
It's also just frustrating when you know that it's just sellers hiking prices up because a game's relevant. Again, too. This was a big thing when Dragon Quest XI came out. The DS games were really cheap for a really long time. I got my copies of 4 and 5 for $20 each, and my copy of 6 I had to play the retail 40. Oh man, I and these were for brand new copies, not even used. And now they're like $100 each if you want them used. And it's like, I know that you're only doing this because Dragon Quest XI was marginally popular, and you're trying to squeeze money out of people, and it's just frustrating.
I would like to see them push Dragon Quest in like a more marketing kind of way than a
I
money
think they
squeezing way.
they should market it to kids because that's the main demographic that the series
Well,
goes for.
well, I mean, it's like every so often Dragon Quest sees some success over here in the West, but they never lean into it, you know?
I mean, I'm just happy they're releasing the games. That's all that I really want. Like they brought over Treasures and they're bringing over Monsters 3. So it's like if we're getting the games in the West, that's all I care about. But I get what you mean. I think that if they wanted it to be the kind of successful that it is in Japan, they would lean into the kids angle because it's a game for children.
Well,
And
I don't necessarily think that's the best idea because the Dragon Quest series is itself leaning into more time consuming, less attention span friendly game design elements like larger overworlds and such. But you know, the like Dragon Quest is a good franchise for people who want more turn-based RPGs in their lives, especially since Final Fantasy isn't giving us that anymore. Because Final Fantasy would literally rather be Devil May Cry than Final Fantasy. I'm sorry, I don't care how good they do it, I'm still going to be bitter.
is Final Fantasy 16 just a straight up action game?
Yes.
I
Okay.
didn't bring up Devil May Cry lightly. They have the DMC combat designers on it.
Okay, you see, I haven't been following it. I didn't know it had gone that far. Like, so I know that Final Fantasy 15 was like leaning into a more Kingdom Heartsy kind of direction. I didn't know that like they were like, okay, cool, now we're gonna go even further and make it.
Final Fantasy 15 had the excuse of being an elevated spin-off, you know? It was supposed to be a side game, an action title to go alongside Final Fantasy 13. But at some point Final Fantasy 13 failed and Tetsuya Nomura went insane and they kind of had to recover what they'd made into something they could sell. And that's how we got Final Fantasy 15. But like Final Fantasy 16 is, you know, is much more deliberate than that.
I remember hearing people complain about the battle system and that it wasn't complicated enough on Twitter. Like I haven't played the game myself. I've only like heard little bits and rumblings about it.
The issue with an action combat system in a turn-based RPG series is that you're designing an action combat system for players who don't generally play action combat games. So the only way that you can make that actually interesting to the target audience you're aiming it at is to emphasize tactical elements, you know? So all of the cool stuff in Final Fantasy VII Remake was tied to like the tactical pause menu system. And
Yeah, I think 7 Remake had the perfect balance between action and RPG stuff.
yeah, so like throughout the battle, you're thinking about the positioning of the enemies, and you're thinking about about which spells and which elements you can deploy at which enemy or which group of enemy to maximize the effect that it has on that on your combat situation. And in many ways it's more tactical than the actual turn-based system it's based on. But like when you go full action combat, the most you're going to get in that kind of game is something like Nier Automata, which is sort of a Bayonetta light in that it has the skeleton of a Bayonetta combat system in an open world RPG. And it's fun, but the combat isn't the kind of highlight that it is in Bayonetta, and it's also not the kind of brain game that it is in a truly good turn-based RPG. So you're kind of just diluting the appeal on both ends.
It's hard to do that kind of mix because I know that my problem with Bayonetta when I played it was it felt like there were fights and then there were not fights where I felt like I was just walking in a straight line and not doing much. And then you went to a fight.
Well, in that respect, you probably like Nier Automata a little bit better because the exploration and all of that and all of the stuff outside the combat is honestly better than the combat. And then there's the combat, which, has the bones and emaciated skin of Bayonetta combat, but,
I probably would like that better because I'm just not good at those kinds of action games, and I would prefer something a little bit less intense overall. But that's also just a preference sort of thing. I know.
I hope you like bullet hell though.
In Nier,
Nier Automata, yeah.
It has lots of bullet hell.
How do you make it a bullet? Okay, whatever.
Spaceship sections.
Look. Okay.
Don't think about it too hard.
Look. Okay. What's his name? Yokotaro.
Yes.
He's just very extra. Okay.
Well, I mean, they'd put a bullet hell section into Bayonetta if they could get away with it, considering that they put in Star Fox and Panzer Dragoon and not Fantasy Star. What's the other one? Fantasy Zone.
Yeah,
they put all those into Bayonetta, so they probably would put in a bullet hell if it was a Sega franchise they could make a reference to.
I do recommend Nier Automata though; it's a fantastic game.
It's on my to-do list for sure, and it got a Switch port, which means I can play it in the bathroom, which is the best way to play any video games. So hold on, Nier Automata Switch. I could probably find it for like $20 now if end of your fucking Switch tax. Never mind, I forgot that I'll be paying full price on that until the day I die.
Well, I think it's still available on Steam for a fairly high-ish price. So it might not be the Switch tax at work there.
If I wanted the PS4 version, I'm already seeing used like $10 if I was going to get the PS4 version, but then I can't play it on the bathroom. So
used prices aren't really going to affect the price of new copies all that much.
Well, I mean, I'd just go for the cheapest version. The thing about Nintendo games, though, is that it's usually just not worth it to buy it used because it's still expensive.
It's like $5 at most.
It's like at that point, I'd rather just have the copy I know is I'd pay the extra $5-10 and get the copy I know is new.
The Steam version of Nier Automata is out on sale for 50% off right now, so that's $20 plus $5 for the DLC. But like the full price is still $40.
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed that it's $40 at this point, considering that this is Square. Tomb Raider only sold $4 million and thus is a failure, Enix. So
4 million copies, not dollars.
They at least went back on that declaration shortly thereafter because I guess they realized that not only was it poor optics, but they kind of jumped the gun on their assessment too.
Yeah, but it's just also very fun to make fun of Square Enix because it's so easy.
Yeah.
So, there's that.
It might also be that like part of the company wasn't as keyed in to what was going on with that franchise because it's one of their Western properties.
I do have to wonder like how the Japanese like business side of Square views the Western properties, because I feel like they haven't really been used in a long while.
Well, they sold off Eidos, so
they sold it off. Oh, when did that happen?
Like earlier this year.
Oh, okay. I must have missed that story then, because
maybe whoever makes the next Tomb Raider game will finally fucking move on from the A Survivor is Born story arc that ended at the end of the first reboot and then just kept going for 2 more games because relatable.
So listen, we told you the story about how Lara Croft became Lara Croft Tomb Raider Adventurer, right? But okay, hear this out. What if we told you about how Lara Croft became Tomb Raider Explorer Extraordinaire? All right.
It's just like they ended the first reboot on this extraordinary moment where it's like Lara is really becoming the badass adventurer that she originally was. She had the dual pistols and everything. It was a wonderful moment. And then they they clearly didn't have an ongoing story planned because Rise of the Tomb Raider starts this entire new plot with the Illuminati and shit. But like they opened the game on the same kind of adventuring disaster that the reboot opened on, and the same kind of mad scramble for survival that the reboot opened on. And it takes a while for you to like gather your momentum and get into the flow of gameplay. And then they do the same fucking thing in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where it opens on this big adventuring disaster, a plane crash, which is funny because that's how Lara Croft originally happened. But like it's just it felt like reboot Lara was going in circles, you know?
So that's actually a thing that I notice a lot of, especially trilogies do, in that you'll have game 1, movie 1, book 1, whatever, where they very clearly have a story that they want to tell and they contain it in that story. And then it's like, you're greenlit for a sequel, great. And we also know that you'll get a sequel after that too. So then the stories for sections 2 and 3 are more connected, and like occasionally you'll bring back some stuff from the first one. But it's like they don't know, the first one is self-contained because they don't know what they're going to be doing. Well, for a franchise, like, and I mean, sometimes that just happens because you don't know if an IP is going to do well yet. But for something like Tomb Raider, where you could be feasibly okay, assuming that you might have a sequel, at least having a plan for what you want the story to be like in later installments would be a good idea, because then you avoid stuff like that.
Well, it also seemed like they did have a loose plan, but they didn't have an ongoing story arc planned, because they ended the Himiko stuff pretty definitively at the end of the reboot, and then brought it back in the comics because, of course. But I'm sorry, that creeped me out, because the whole thing about Himiko in the Tomb Raider reboot is that she summons fucking storms to keep people from leaving her island so that she can find someone to possess. And as soon as I started talking about Himiko, the fucking thunder happened.
So that's why it's been raining every day this past week. Awesome.
Summer rains, you can never predict them.